Taking a child, he placed it in their midst, and putting his arms around it, he said to them, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me." Upstairs in the friary on the far side, there is a painting, and it's been in that hallway as long as I've been around, of this scene of Jesus calling children, more than one child, it's a bunch of kids really, if I remember correctly, to himself, and putting his arms there to embrace them. There was a time when that picture was charming. Now it's a harsh reminder of the mess we find ourselves in at times in some places today within our faith tradition. In Jesus' time, why did he choose a child? Let's start there. Why did he choose a child to make this proclamation, to make this teaching? And again, he's speaking to his disciples here. He's not teaching the crowd, right? He's teaching them what it means to be a disciple, right? This is kind of the advanced course, right? He's not talking, to the folks out there. He's talking to his disciples, right? The people who would become the 12, as they are called in the gospel today, and the people that would eventually pass on that ministry to the people today we call bishops. In this world, there was no greater non-person than a child, right? Children had no rights, none, zip. Slaves had more rights than a child because a child had none, right? It's even interesting, if you read the pronoun of the text, taking a child, he placed it in their midst and putting his arms around it. It's not even a personal pronoun. Treating the child like an object, because that's in that world, that's how children were looked at. Right? Times have changed dramatically, for the better, obviously, right? Hence, there is no less powerful creature in the entire world than a child in this world. Right? There is no creature with less power than a child. But Jesus draws them to himself and says, "Whoever receives one child such as this in my name receives me." What is Jesus saying about himself? Right? That he himself is like a child, that he himself is powerless in a worldly understanding. Right? Think back to how the passage begins. He was teaching his disciples and telling them, "The Son of Man is to be handed over to men. They will kill him, and 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise." He shows that he has no power. He exercises no power in this world, in a worldly sense. That's who he is. But again, going back to where we started today, right? We look back and you look, at least, especially if you're a priest, right? You look at that image upstairs and it's just a harsh reminder of how so many clerics, not priests, clerics, that's a subtle point. We can talk about that some other day. How so many clerics abused the powerless. They exercised power over creatures that had no power at all, abused power. And worse, perhaps, some so-called shepherds proved to be wolves, right? Who also exercised power to protect themselves, to protect their institution. This is the opposite of what Jesus is about, as we hear so clearly today in this gospel. Many clearly did not get the memo. Now, the whole point of this is not to throw rocks at a bunch of people who deserve it in a certain sense, but let he who has, and this is the point, isn't it? Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. It's not for us to judge others. That's God's job. God will sort this out. Right? God will sort this out. The message to us is, how are we to be in the world? How are we to be in the world? Right? If anyone wishes to be first, he shall be last of all and the servant of all. Right? We're here in the world to serve, not to be people of power. There are other faith traditions that use power to build up the ranks. Even today, that's not our, Catholic evangelization is basically opening the door and see who comes in. That's a good thing, right? We're not out there with swords and machine guns trying to get people to come in the door, right? Right? People come freely. People are drawn to whatever they find here. That's a good thing, as it should be, right? Because as some wise person said, and I don't know who it is, right? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. That is true. Just look around the world, right? And we picked on the clerics this morning, but there's plenty of guilt to go around, right, in a certain sense, right? People in power in our own country continue to not protect the rights of children who just happen to have not been born yet. What a disgrace that is. How can that be? How can that be? Right? How can a great nation uphold that and call itself great? And again, it's not the folks, it's the people in power. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Francis of Assisi understood this. In fact, this is his great contribution, really, to the spiritual tradition. It's not all this loving bunnies nonsense, petting a dog, kissing a bird, all that stuff. That's cute, right? That's the Disney version of St. Francis, right? Francis of Assisi, not to be confused with St. Francis. If you're interested in this, we're going to do a talk next month in October. Tune in. But Francis of Assisi got this. At some point, as the community grew, as there were a community that began with a handful of pretty stupid guys from Assisi, in a certain sense, unlettered, uneducated, it eventually grew to thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people, many of them, most of them, very well educated at some point. And came under the notice of the church, obviously. And they say, hey, these guys are good. We're going to use that. But every once in a while, there's a rogue everywhere, and every once in a while, somebody would wander off out of, and do things they shouldn't have done. Right? And the church says, Francis, you need to go catch that person and punish them. And what is Francis's response to that? He resigns. He resigns as the legal leader of the community. Not many people know this. It's well documented, but we don't talk about that very much. Why? Because his great contribution is to renounce power. The renunciation of power. Jesus comes into the world as the Son of God. He's the second person of the Trinity, all powerful. If God wanted to wipe this mess away in a second, God could. Right? But God doesn't. Right? In fact, the God that we worship through Jesus Christ is all loving, all compassionate, all merciful, incredibly patient, and puts up with all this nonsense. Why? With the hope that some of us will get it. Right? Think back to that wonderful parable, right? About, plant the seeds, and somebody put some weed seeds with the good seeds, and there's weeds grown with the good stuff, and they say, should we pull up the weeds? And the wise farmer says, no, I don't do that, because if you pull up the weeds, you're going to pull up the good stuff. Hence, God doesn't wipe us all out. Right? But the path forward is to accept this vision of service. Why are we here? We're not here for power. We're here for service. Whatever that means for wherever you are in life. And that's true for everybody here today. Right? Whether you're a mom or a dad, a husband, a wife, a child, a single person, active in the world. Even those who aren't well, those who are struggling, your sufferings are a way of service in a certain sense. Right? So you're serving the kingdom through your patient endurance. We're all called to serve in whatever way is appropriate to our station in life. But we're called to serve, not have power. Now, for the kids in the place who are thinking, this is great. Parents have a responsibility to attend to the formation of their children. That's not abuse of power, that's serving your children. Right? That's serving your children. I'm just going to say one more thing about that. This is an aside, but it's something that comes up all the time in confession. Right? This is an aside. Parents come in and say, I don't know what to do. My kid is on the internet 12 hours a day playing games and God knows what. The thing's got an off button. You need to exercise your responsibility. This is trust me, you sitting here every day for an hour, this is a big problem. This is a huge problem. Parents, please be attentive. Do your responsibility. When you brought those children to be baptized, you promised to God that you would raise them in the faith. Right? Be attentive to that. Be conscious of that. And again, it's not about having power over your kid. It's about serving your child. Right? We ask God to help us with that, to give us the gift of service. Service to one another, that we might truly love one another, that we might not be presumptuous of God's patience, right? But that we do the best we can to live renouncing power and living a life of service to God and to one another.